Happy Valentine's Day to those that are still in the 14th. Kind of a fun day for some. It is the 14th of February here in the States. And this is the 3 p.m. Tuesday help desk. I need some help. Yeah, old news there. So we're just finishing up talking about, we're still waiting to get a little bit more definitive word on the whole FXCM reality. Do realize that FXCM does have currently a interactive brokers data feed. And Interactive Brokers also has a dedicated trading station, much like FXCM did. So there are possibilities on that front. Still waiting to hear back about the data feed for FXCM and opinions on whether Americans will be able to gain accounts to FXCM UK. We shall see. So we were going to kind of get started, at least look at some thoughts about Gary. 10-minute trading. You know, we're behind the scenes moving towards getting the Peak3/Power10 and variants of Peak3 into motive wave. I'm not going to put a estimated time frame on that, but it'll be somewhere here shortly. You know, I'm not talking days, but I'm also not talking 6 months. And so that will really round out a lot of what we needed to have so we can have it on both platforms. I'm going to show you something here, and I want to have some conversation about it. Just kind of fun. Let me explain what we got here. Oops. Let me put it here. So the center of the screen, I've taken the price field out of it. The price field's up here. Candlestick real estate. So we have multi-wave. Of course, we have a traditional slow stochastics down here with settings that kind of work and are tuned to what we're doing. 10-minute, about the highest you're going to want to run this on because it is lagging nonetheless, but does give confidence that you've actually had your turns. And in the middle, we have Peak3 in green, which would be our 10-minute. So Peak3 in green is our 10-minute Peak3. And in blue is our 30-minute Peak3. So we're using the 10-minute Peak3 as the sole indicator here. So what this is now we're on a 10-minute chart. And so we're looking at the relationship between the 10-minute wave and the 30-minute wave in ways that, you know, I think Peak3 really does a good job at showing you the complete trend, whereas the 10-minute representation of the waves has more impact by candles. Okay, in other words, when you see peak 3 plotted out, it's not as impacted by the candles as multi-wave is. Does that make sense? So sometimes you get a little bit better recognition of what's really going on in terms of the waves. And it can help you trade for sure. But here we're looking at 10-minute and 30-minute relationships. So just out of curiosity, looking at this chart with the field of view that you have, which is limited, I get it, but where on this chart do you think, I'm going to erase all this other stuff now, where on this chart do you think we have the strongest move? Give me an approximate time. So I'll give you a few seconds, a few minutes to analyze this. Jeopardy music plays. You guys have Jeopardy music in down under? Okay, so I'll mark where people are suggesting. We have one comment around midnight is one. We have one at 10:50 as another. $22.20 right in here as another. Guess I shouldn't cover the time. I'll just remark it. We have a 1:30. We have a 2:10. We have a 0,400. We got another 400. And we have another 400. Steve, it's just not working. Let's let the penny be thicker instead of having to do multiple trips. We have 1, 2, 3 there at 400. Okay. So as you can see, quite a variety of thoughts. And again, kind of not a totally fair question based on the waves, but at the same time. So what we should understand is in concept, remember Peak 3 is 4 very precise, well, it's precisely tuned, four separate turnaround indicators. There are some things in those indicators to prevent a lot of hard V's, to prevent chop. But the concept is the same to multi-wave as far as a convergence, as far as pull-aways from the convergence, as far as retracements, etc. Now I didn't give you all of the chart, right? But what we can see is in a normal situation, we see the 30-minute wave come up. There's like a convergence here. I don't want to draw on top of it. I should just draw around it or near it. So here we have the 30-minute wave come up. You can see in this range, for the most part, at least as the 30-minute peak 3 is going, it is snaking. And we can see that, you know, there was a convergence up here of sorts. We see that's a pretty big carrot to be called a carrot. Normally our carrots, you know, aren't that deep. And so obviously we come up to another convergence, which again this is showing here. We have a pullback from that, you know, which we're seeing with the 10-minute wave. Go back up to another convergence, which we kind of see. But then some stuff in here with the 30-minute wave that I don't know that we can recognize. Now again, remember, we're not looking at a 5-minute chart and we're not looking at a 1-minute chart. So the 10-minute chart in terms of waves in history are going to look like they're not very useful, because they're not. You know, a 10-minute candle, we can have a lot of fluctuation in price, which literally can take, you know, the waves from one end of the indicator to the other, but only show up and plot at one point once a camera picture is taken every 10 minutes, right? So we get a little bit more smoothing out of all that with Peak 3, and you know, when you do comparatives with Peak 3, it really does a pretty good job. So we see these are all, you know, pretty strong, a snake, and so we see these as pulls against that snake. So these, you know, would be at least suitable buy into the sell opportunities. We have a third convergence. I don't know what you mean by 5 wave. You talking Elliott wave? No, y'all can cheat. I should have hidden the you know, I know people. Yeah, no, there's no 5-minute wave in here. And really, a lot of times I'll even take off the 3, because I just want to see the 10-minute wave as my screener, you know. But anyway, back to what I was saying here. So these would be, you know, 1, 2, 3 potential buys and sells. You know, we know there's going to be a limit. Whatever this pullback is, that's what we can achieve going back up to maybe a slightly higher high. These will be good, easy pips, where they're not necessarily the biggest move. So we go on, we have another convergence, and now we have a pullback against it, which is now pulling back the 30-minute wave. So what do we have here when we look at this? We'll call that pullback number 4 versus this move up here at 5. See, at 4, we can still call this, again, we'd have to see price, we'd have to see previous convergences to understand whether this is proportional or disproportionate. But just looking at the waves here, you know, looking at 5, we know that's an interesting scenario, because it appears to be like operating like a fan, but it's coming from a fan. And so when we see that kind of thing, what do we normally know? That we're cycling. Right? A fan following a fan is normally a cycle, right? Everybody understands that? Everybody remembers that? Everybody's already known that? These are yes/no questions. So we have that cycle, and what happens in that cycle? This is pretty interesting to look at. It was only a one cycle. It wasn't multiple cycles. It was a pullback from a retrace, and now we're going down, and we come all the way down to where not only does the 10-minute wave come back down to an extreme, but it brings the blue wave down here too. So we're in a convergence zone down here, which obviously is this area right here. Again, 10-minute charts, so where that 1-minute wave ends up plotting inside a 10-minute candle, it could be at any 10 different levels. So we can't, there is some, you have to understand the candle relationship to the wave plots. There's a big jump going from 5 to 10 minutes in terms of that, in terms of where the plot is, especially the lower level plots. But you can see the 30, the 10, the 3, the 5 would have been down there as well if I had it plotted. The only thing that's short is the 1. And that's just exactly where it occurred inside that 10-minute candle. So pretty strong convergence down here. And then we start cycling out of that, you know, back up. And again, we'd have to see price to see if this was a retrace or if this was just going to another convergence or whatever. But looking at that now, seeing what everything is, you might want to adjust your thoughts. These are buys into the sells. They're going to be good pips, but they're limited. From wherever price pulled back from this convergence, it's just going to retrace back up to a higher high. We have that, you know, 1, 2, 3 times. The 4th time it starts pulling down the 30-minute wave, it cycles, and then it pulls it down even further. So from the logic, I mean, not just because I know what happened, from the logic, this looks like it could be the strongest move. Now, 10-minute trading, we're just dealing with the 30-minute wave. We're not trying to do 30-minute trading here. We're just looking at the stronger 10-minute wave moves. Every peak and valley of the green Peak3, you know, is, well, peak and valley at extremes, is a potential trade. And in fact, you know, there are elements of this system where the green Peak3 is the only thing I have in here, sometimes the LC, but Peak3, and every one of these would be entries, and the exit would be right here as it starts hooking back up. So these are short-term trades. You're thinking in terms of, you know, a nice 7 to 12 pip range. If I get a little less or a little more, that's still within, you know, understanding. And so I don't try and fight this. I'm not out in competition to get as many pips as I can per trade and do everything impossible to possible to make that happen. This isn't an ego battle. This is an understanding that I'm just doing. This is called a pip accumulation strategy. Scalping at its best is a pip accumulation strategy. But 10-minute trades are still a pip accumulation strategy. Rather than 1 30-minute 50-pip trades, I'm going to pick off 5, 10, 12, you know, 8, 15-pip trades one at a time and add them together. It's a pip accumulation strategy. And as such, we're not trying to fight to harvest every single pip that might be possible. Again, we want to trade like a robot and trade the same way robotically, the same way each and every time in each and every trade. That removes the emotion. And if I get 7 pips from a trade, I'm not looking at it, trying to figure out how I could have got 9. I'm just moving on to my next trade. I'm not talking about discounting a learning process, but I'm talking about once you start trading this, it's all about just get your pips, get out, get to the next pair that's having a 10-minute Peak3 at convergence or at an extreme. But we want to be aware of the 30-minute because it's going to tell us things, right? We know that. And when I have these hookbacks, okay, if I'm in the sell on all of these, we know the hookbacks are my time for exit. Circumstances when you see price field may allow you to do buys into the sells on these, but that's going to require price field analysis. See how far back these pullbacks are. If on this pullback we pulled back 8 pips, and in this pullback I'm 7 pips and it's turning around, I would feel safe to enter it. Why? We have a 1-to-1 correlation. We have the 8 pips associated with about a 50%, 55% pullback. I'm at 7 pips, and again I have about a 50-55% pullback. I'm safe to assume there's a correlation between these two. The number of pips and the strength of the wave coming back. When I get it a third time, again at this 7-8 pips, something like that, and it pulls back in this same zone, about the same place, I can feel comfortable about this not coming back on me much further, because it's done it twice in front of me. So we do, put a little bit more reliance on the history repeating itself. So every one of these has that same exit. Every one of these would have been a good 10-minute trade. 10-minute trade there, exit. 10-minute trade there, exit. 10-minute trade there, exit. 10-minute trade there, exit. Now, we come into this second fan, the fan on the fan instead of the fan on the retrace. And we have to think about what's going on here. We can see the 30-minute wave coming down. We know it's already pulled back once, and so we know a fan on a fan is a cycle. And those are good things to have. That is much like the B of an ABC. Remember, in a complete ABC, we have some sort of impulsive move up. The retrace of that move, this here, this retrace, consists of an impulsive move, a retrace, and an impulsive move. So in terms of how that would show up in multi-wave, this pullback is going to measure as a retrace because it's part of this arm. And this will be very easy to see as we're getting near the end of the retrace, how that should be called a retrace. The thing in here is going to operate as a retrace and a retrace, or each one of these represents a fan. So in terms of multi-wave, you can see how this would fan on down, representing a retrace, and this would fan up. So you can call this cycling if you want. That's what we're doing. We're going to an ABC to complete this retrace. This is an ABC retrace, or an ABC correction. So this is just cycling the wave down to a deeper run. But as we know, this was an impulsive move. This is going to be an impulsive move. So these are generally good trades, assuming you get the top of it. Well, we've got a bunch of language that becomes semantical. In the lower level charts, that retrace, because of the multiple waves, fans out. Those lower level waves will, they fan out. And so that's how we call that a fan retrace. It just means we're seeing the retrace with lower level waves intact. It's still a retrace. From a reality, what's happening on the charts, percentages, trading, and everything else, these two are equal. This just has the distinction of having lower level waves, and we can see them fan. But Peak 3, when in relationship with another wave, in this case a lower Peak 3 in relation to an upper, a 10 to a 30, you're going to see relationships, that you would normally see, let's say, between the 5 and the 30 or the 10 and the 30. It's just we're seeing it with more detail or intricacy because it's 4 waves, 4 separate indicators instead of just one. So the Peak 3 pullbacks that end midstream, was a convergence going to a retrace rather than a convergence going to a convergence. But the bottom line here is this entire arm would be the retrace, and yet inside that retrace we do have a retrace that takes place, and that's what causes the cycle. We have a wave come up, and people would say, well, it's pulling back, it's a 38% correction. Or let's say 50. Let's make this just so like textbook idiot that it's not even funny. So we have a correction that comes down to 50, and then it pulls back to 38 in order to come down to 62. So this is a retrace because it's a retrace of the whole arm. This is a retrace because it's a retrace of that retrace. This would be a retrace because it would be disproportional. Be disproportionate there, and it's going to be disproportionate here. The move against that, though, is a retrace. That's why it's called a retrace of a retrace. Sometimes people call them double retraces. It really started out as a retrace and a retrace. So this is retracing, and this is retracing that retrace, only to gain strength and move down. So these cycle points are very strong. They're one of the strongest trades you can make. They're as strong as this, but if you can see them, in the waves, they're dang strong. Which is why, as we look at this here, 5 ends up being the strongest trade possible because of what it's doing in terms of the 4 had pulled down the 30-minute wave, and the 5 goes to an extreme. It's just cycling it. Now it's going to come back down. That's not a higher high because the 30-minute wave isn't converging there. Well, if you're only looking at the 10-minute wave, convergence, 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 those are, as I said, all trades. The exits, because it doesn't end up going to the opposite side of the chart, it hooks back on you. So you exit, because this is what a retrace or a pullback looks like in terms of the relationship between the 30 and between the 10 and the 30. So every one of these pullbacks that ends midstream or somewhere in the middle of the channel other than the extreme, we have to acknowledge could be going back the other way. So we exit. And yes, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they are just, smaller hookbacks only for the green wave to go up higher and continue to come back down. But again, we don't play that coin toss. We don't play that lottery ticket. We take the safest trade that there is possibly. So I don't worry about, in this concept of 10-minute convergences, if the 30-minute wave isn't going there, I'm not worried about thinking every one of these convergences is bringing, an upper level wave higher. That is the reality. And so they are technically cycling in that sense. And as you would look at the chart, I would expect 5 to be higher than these other points in terms of price. But that's just not, it's adding too much. We're here to get some pips and get out and move on to the next trade. These are burst trades. That's why they're, it's SBTs. It's the burst system. This isn't about going through all sorts of conflagrations to try and figure out a trade. These are a little larger entries, meaning if I'm just trading this 10-minute wave by itself, I look for it to flip. When I see it flip, I give myself a 5-pip stop loss, and I'm off and trading the next trade. I let it go. It hooks back, I exit. If it goes the other side, I exit. I'm not really interested. I could trade this without price, is what I'm saying. Because of scale, and because there are times where you think you're ending the wave and it fakes you out, which is why we like the more V look to it. But as long as we're on the downside of it, for the most part, we're safe. But it will, from time to time, snake. And sometimes it's just a few pips. With a 3-pip stop loss, I've discovered it's enough to take you out sometimes. And there's just a more, it's a different kind of trading, just trading the Peak3. It's more comfortable, it's more casual, it's very robotic. There's no beating yourself up for, what could have been done. Every one of those trades could have a more precise entry with lots more waves and lots more analysis, but this is just green wave, extreme to extreme. If it ends in the middle, you just exit your trade there. Your target upon entry is the opposite side. No pitchforks, no Fibonacci. This is just very simplistic trading. Yes, when I'm trading just the green wave and nothing else, I'm using a 5-pip stop loss. When it hooks back from the extreme. Nope, not even looking, don't even have multi-wave on there. So, no 1-minute wave, nothing. Just the green wave. That's all you need. Now, like I said, can I go into each trade and look at my 1-minute chart and find all sorts of stuff on my 1-minute chart that might give me better timing sometimes? Yeah. But as I said, this is a different kind of trading. It's still harmonic wave convergence. It's still based on that. It's just a more simplistic way of looking. It's more of a black box way of trading. The win percentages, are not as high, but the wins are very good. Well, we're only talking about buys into the sells in terms of a 30-minute wave, and I don't want to talk about that here because that's not 10-minute trading. If you're doing a buy into the sell off the Peak3 off a 10-minute chart, you're actually doing, that's not just Peak3 extreme to extreme. And unless I have that 30-minute wave there to guide me, that 30-minute Peak3, I'm not doing buys into the sells in my normal. As I said, that would only be an exit point for, in this case, it would be an exit point for all those cells. The buys into the cells are only because this chart has a 30-minute wave on it, and it was used for an illustration to say which would be the most powerful move on here. Yeah, I'm looking at, there's several ways of doing this. And so, you know, it could really be a good facilitator. But I want to finish this thing before I come to that specific question, Mike. No, one more time. Guys, I know I've said this 100 times. Peak 3 is 4 indicators. Wait, you know, averaged together. LC is a single indicator. So Peak 3 can't be the motive wave LC. LC is LC. LC is the LC in IntelliCharts. LC is the LC in motive wave. We make an adjustment in motive wave to call it LC plus, because that's just to make up for the slight difference we see between IntelliCharts and motive wave, especially at extremes. So we stretch one side a little bit more than the other, and we get pretty darn close to what we see in IntelliCharts. At least we're all trading the same thing. So Peak 3 is very powerful. I've said this all along because it's 4 waves. It's 4 indicators. 4 separate indicators in one. And the indicators that are included, each one serves a purpose. And they serve to overlap. So they're designed to be, it's designed to be a all-in-one indicator. And the 4 indicators that are inside it represent, you know, they're a team. And where one seems to have a deficit in one kind of situation, the others rally and they show strength and give you the truer picture. When one of the others is weaker, then the other 3 come along and rally and kind of fill out the picture. So it's very, very powerful. Peak 3 is not yet in motive wave, which is why I said it's one of those things we're working on to get there. So it can't be the same thing as the LC wave. The LC wave does not mimic harmonic wave convergence because the LC wave can be at extreme on a retrace, which multi-wave does not do except in rare exceptions where we run out of indicator space. But your typical, you know, bell curve harmonic wave convergence retrace will often, most of the time, in a true picture, have the LC wave going all the way to extreme. The only places where you're going to see the LC wave kind of retracing sometimes is that when you're measuring a lower level LC to an upper level LC. And you can see the lower level LC will pull back faster than the upper level LC, you know, just like you would expect in multi-wave. The lower level wave pulls back deeper and faster than the upper level wave. Yeah, there's nothing in here. With this flat top here, that means this week didn't do so much either. So pretty much what you see with the 30-minute wave there is what you got, and that's pretty much the high of the 30-minute wave. So, you know, from some of these points, you know, these all make sense. Pull back higher high, pull back higher high, pull back higher high. You know, this one, you know, we would have, and again, you got some wicks in here. This is a 10-minute chart, so these things are going to be distorted a little. But you would still think this high up here then would be a higher high. But again, remember, it's a retrace. So, you know, it is slightly higher, but it doesn't show it as a convergence here. Well, again, I don't, you know, maybe this is a bad example. I was just trying to show the relationships between the 30 and the 20. For a 10-minute system, I am not doing, there are no buys into the sells or sells into the buys at the 10-minute level. You're strictly doing 10-minute trading. That 10-minute trading can be influenced by the 30 in the sense that when I see this, I know it's going to be a strong drop. Only because we had been snaking, we have a pullback against that snake, we have a retrace in a retrace. See, the whole retrace and a retrace confuses people. But what you have to understand, and I'll just use Peak3 to kind of explain the retrace and a retrace. If you take a normal situation, whoops. You know, we've got our 0 to 100 scale here. Now, I'm going to make a very simple move on a 30-minute chart. So we have some sort of convergence, so we would have a convergence down here, and we have a proportionate move up. And let's say that proportionate move up is 100 pips to a point of convergence. I was trying to do my I was trying to do my best to keep that angle the same, keep my verticals in line. All right. So if this pulls back, that would be 50, that would be 25, that would be 75. If this pulls back here, there's two things we can note because I've given this scale. First of all, that's a 25% pullback. In this particular case, because of the scale I gave it, that's 25 pips. So if in that same time frame or in that same pullback, multi-wave has done that, we would say, well, multi-wave has pulled back 50%. So 25% in price pullback, 50% in multi-wave. We now call that disproportionate, and therefore we become a retrace. But in technical terms with multi-wave, how do we measure this pullback to 25%? We put a Fibonacci on it, and we go from the swing low to the swing high, and then we measure that pullback against that distance. In multi-wave, the only way we can have that internal Fibonacci is if we go from harmonic wave convergence to harmonic wave convergence. That's what we have in terms of measuring this distance down. So it's suitable as a measurement. Wherever this is over here, that's, we equate that to a percentage. And we get a little off because of the 89 and 11 Dealey watts, but don't let that get too technical on yourself there. Don't get, paralysis through analysis. So what happens then when this move goes this distance and this wave, well, let me make this halfway, and this goes almost back up to a convergence? The reality is, let's look at the first example. So example 1, this is example 2. In example 1, you can technically get a precise point per pip. Almost a speed. It is a distance, but it's like a speed because they operate faster than price is. It was operating 1-to-1 on the way up. It's now operating at a elevated speed here compared to price. That's how we get to 50% versus 25. So you can come up with a points per pip, can't we? And in this case, it would be essentially we moved 50 points in multi-wave for 25 pips in price. So we have 2 points per pip. Now we're digging deep. I don't expect you to do this in every time you have a revet, but I'm showing you how this works out. So we have for 1 pip. I don't even need to say 1, just per pip. So we have 2 points per pip. Is there a problem with any of this? Does anybody have any question at all about that? How we come up with that conclusion for move number 1? If you do, give me a question mark. I want to figure it out. So the problem we have with move number 2 is we can't measure this because this was not a harmonic wave convergence. This would have to come from here all the way down here, so we can essentially then look at the move back up this way and say whether that's disproportionate or not. We have nothing to judge it by, like we do in scenario number 1, in our traditional way of measuring what is a retrace based on percentage pullback. We don't have a way of doing that. So let's think about this as I've drawn it. If this was 25 pips down here, right now, where do you think the end of wave 2 is? Or the second price move up? At that point there, about how many pips do you think we've gone from X to Y? It's pretty absolute. You can see it. So what do you think it is? Yeah, it's just, as I've drawn, it might be just a tad over half. So it's, 12, 13, something like that. If we've come down to X is 25 pips and price has gone back to Y, that's got to be about 12 pips. Maybe 13, whatever. It's in that range. Does everybody get that? Got some answers quite different than that, but so we're about in there. So absolute 25 pips down to this point, we go back to Y. 25 pips down, we go up about 12, because getting back up here is, we're about halfway there, maybe a little over as I've drawn it, but don't get hung up in that. So to get back up to that point would be another 12, we're half the distance, so about 12 pips. What did we move in price? What did we move in multi-wave? And I over-exaggerate, doesn't even have to be that much, Multi-wave went from 50 to 25. So while we can't measure harmonic wave convergence in terms of our typical Fibonacci ways, we can look at it here and say, well, we just moved 12 pips, but we traveled 25 multi-wave points. And guess what we end up with? 2 points per pip. Now, what about on the ride up? Since this was 100 pips, what was the pip price per point per pip on the move up? We had 100 pips and we moved 100 points, so it was exactly 1. We had a 1-to-1 relationship. So now of the two, the move up at 1 or the move down, so we go from, I hate putting anything on here, I'll put strange numbers. The move from 7 to 8, 8 to 9, and 9 to 10. So which does the move in terms of price per point, does the move from 9 to 10 look closer to? Does it look closer to the move up at 1-to-1, which would make it a proportionate move? Or does it look closer to the 8 to 9 move down here, which we'd have to call disproportionate? It looks closer to this, right? So the 8 to 9 move, the 9 to 10 move, we have to call something. We have to be able to treat it one way or another. So it's this is a retracement. There's no ifs, ands, and buts. By law of association, if we are calling the move from 8 to 9 disproportionate, since the speed of 9 to 10 is exactly the same, it has to be disproportionate. Law of association. I think law of association was what? Math, 7th grade, 6th grade, 8th grade? I don't know. Depends on where you went to school, I guess. So we can't measure it in terms of what we taught you in SFX 30. Because we didn't come down to we didn't come to a convergence at 9. So how can I measure anything up? That's how you can do it technically. But more so, you'll see it in price. You just need to be able to see it. See, the thing is, excuse me one second. The thing is, a brand new trader, Kevin, you're going to have a little harder time with this because you haven't spent as much time letting your eyes focus on both channels. As an experienced trader, you need to be able to see this. You need to be able to see a move in price on the chart and know whether that move is proportionate or disproportionate. And what fools most traders is if you stand back 5 feet and look at this, the blue in the price field looks very similar to the blue in the multi-wave field, and so they think the move is the same. And yet, it's not at all. This move here, the X to Y or the 9 to 10 move, is moving very slow compared to what multi-wave is moving. It's moving half the speed. Multi-wave is moving 2 points for every pip. Unless it's 1-to-1, you're in a retrace. 1.5-to-1 would be a retrace. Now I'm not going to say 1.12, I'm not going to get that specific, that's not a read, we can't see that enough. But here's visible. It's visible not so much by the physical waves in the price movement, it's physical by you measuring the absolute field, which is price, against the relative field, which is multi-wave. And, you know, I'm just showing you, you should be able to see it. Oh, you know, 8 to 9 was a 25 pip move, and I moved 50 points in multi-wave. 9 to 10, it moved 12 points, and I moved 25 points in multi-wave. The speed of these two is the same. If it looks like a duck and walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So by law of association, not because I have something to measure it against in our traditional way of 0 to 100 and how much of a pullback, but just in the speed it's moving. Because the pip distance against the motive wave point distance is disproportionate. Motive wave is moving faster. And in this case, this move up, it's still moving as fast as this move hit here. Yes, it could be a 2 or an ABC. The only thing that kind of throws our traditional way of looking at this, Mark, is, as you said earlier, is that this move up actually went to a slightly higher high. So from our 1-2 knowledge, you know, that kind of rules it out as being a Elliott wave 2. But, you know, again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time emphasizing an exception. I want to talk about what happens 85-90% of the time. Because as long as we hit it on 85-90% of the time, screw the exceptions. They're not going to impact our money. They're just part of doing business to get to that 85 or 90% of the time. But this here reality, this is why it's called a retrace, inner retrace, because it's a retrace that's happening inside a retrace that's already there. And now this move down from Y or 10 or whatever we want to label it is going to be a pretty aggressive move. It's either the 2-3 move or it's the BC move. As Mark said, it's either wave 2 or an ABC. So, yeah, and Gary called it a momentum move. It's going to be definitely a momentum impulsive move. So what happens here, and this is why multi-wave, as we said many times, is a now system. Here's your now 1. Here's your now 2. No, we can hit a cow. Now 2. And here's your now 3. I cannot tell you how many times in the past where we would get in here and people are hanging in this move up. Right? Or what I get is people who are already in the sell, okay, ditching it, you know, somewhere in here because it's, oh, I don't want to see that erosion take place. Well, the problem is they just cut themselves out because this is coming back down. And I'll say, why did you exit here? With me already seeing this disproportionality, with me already seeing these speeds are the same point per pip. And I'll say, why did you exit here? And you know what they say? Because that's the now 3 read. That's their now 3 read. You know what they tell me? Because their now 2 read said they're going to a higher high. They're not paying attention to the current read. They're still hung up on 2, where this was measured as a retrace, and so obviously when that retrace ends, we're going to a higher high. Right? Do you see the mistake there? They're not seeing, when this thing takes off here, it looks too similar to this up here, and they just think they're bleeding off earned pips. When if you can look at it and you can see the disproportionality, oh, we're all guilty of it. When you can see the disproportionality, now you can't always see it, so, you know, for those that have done that, you know, hey, I have no problem. but I'm overemphasizing it to say now that we're looking at a retrace and a retrace. You have to, if you can have a chance at seeing it, and you do see it, don't exit. We're just saying, it's going to be a 2. It's going to be the the B and the ABC. It's a retracement up. It will not all of a sudden become proportional. So this is what's happening underneath in terms of a retrace and a retrace. It actually is a speed, it's a distance disproportionality, but most of the time you can see it pretty quickly and do the math in your head. The quickest way to typically see this retrace and the retrace is the slightest pip movement here going back up from the end of this retrace. The slightest pip movement here has exaggerated movement down here. And you go, uh-oh, this isn't going to a higher high. Now, if that's not clear, let me know. No, doesn't make you a bad trader. I'm doing my best to explain it from a technical perspective in how you can measure a secondary move being a retrace when you can't use normal technology to measure it. The reality is, and I don't remember in SFX30 if we talk about points per pip. As my dad used to say, I might have fallen off the turnip truck, but it wasn't last night. I love that. So it's just a speed thing, and then law of association. If we're going to call this wave disproportionate and the next move, this price move disproportionate, well, the wave compared to this disproportionate. So we call this move disproportionate. We're calling this a retrace, and this is moving at exactly the same speed in multi-wave, points per pip. Then again, it's just that complete law of association. They're both retracements. And since we're calling this a retracement, we're no longer going to a higher high. So at the time we see that, and it might not be right away. Like I said, sometimes the very smallest pip movement here, you'll see price pull back, price pulls back like this, and that little movement right there, we'll have multi-wave shoot off like that. And so when we get down to it, we can, we knew this was a retracement, and if this is moving at this speed, where it's just that visible. This has moved 5 points, and this has only moved 1 pip. You'll see it sometimes. So these two have to be the same thing. If they're moving at the same speed, even though we can't measure this arm in terms of how we would normally measure a retracement, we're not looking at percentages of retracement at that point. We're just looking at pip speed. Point per pip speed, because we can't measure it with a retracement. What happens if you try and go and do that measurement mid-channel as a mid-channel retracement? Can anybody guess? In other words, over here on the right, what happens if we try and do a Fibonacci from here to here and measure that retracement up in terms of both pips and multi-wave. Yeah, it's going to be proportionate. And that's what screws a lot of people up when you have these mid-channel changes like that, because they try and go from here to here with a Fibonacci and look at this, and it's going to show up the same as this was. Because remember, what happens here, if we measure from here to here and now up, the 12 pips we gained up, we have a 25 pip drop and we gain 12 pips up, that's going to look about 50%. And so when they come down here and measure it from here to here, because they're cheating, because there's nowhere in here have we ever taught do a Fibonacci measurement when it's not at the end of the channel. But because it's not at the end of the channel, they think they can just, well, I'll just apply the same thing. So this is just pulled down 50 points and it's pulled back up to 25. Both price and multi-wave is going to look 50%, so they're comfortable, and this is going to go to a higher high because those are both proportional. See the mistake they made? You can't do that. We have no way of measuring this with Fibonacci unless it goes from extreme to extreme. If you measure it mid-channel, it's just going to look, the math's going to be the same. You have a 50% move up in price and a 50% move up in multi-wave. The trouble is, this move down was already disproportionate. And so by saying this is 50% and this is 50%, we're just saying these two waves are moving at the same speed. I love this session, but I know I'm losing some people. I apologize if that's the case. I'll encourage you to watch this a second time. That's why we record it. But this is also why there's a lot of hidden data in multi-wave. That's why the system can be very precise. But you have to measure your now. You have to measure your now. Where are you now? And you can't rely on past things that stood out to you. So your RAS is shutting down possibilities. Oh, you know, here it now too. This is a retrace. Oh, it just ended. I'm going to a higher high. And that's all your RAS is going to allow you to see at that point. You have to retune your RAS to say, hey, at every read, now we go. Now look, you're going to get to a point, and I was talking about this earlier today to somebody, you're going to get to a point where, yeah, your trade entries are going to take a little bit of time. Once you're in the trade, you're good to go. You have very simplistic money management. It either goes or it doesn't. If you want to peel some profit off like Marianne likes to do, that's great. Put it in the bank as the trade moves forward. If you want to hold it all and just move your stop loss and be settled with that, you know, do that. No, not just the duck feet. Why are you saying that? It's the whole duck. The move up is exactly the same as the move down. It's disproportionate. And disproportionate we call a retracement. Yeah. Well, the detail, I don't know. There's no more detail to show. What's the ultimate reality of a retracement? Is it's moving faster or deeper than price is for the same stretch of time. It's easy for us to measure that with Fibonacci when we go from harmonic wave convergence to harmonic wave convergence. When we're in the midst of a harmonic, when we're in the mid-channel, there's no way of measuring. I just showed you, it'll give you the wrong read. So we have to find another way. All we're looking for is the same thing, though. Every move has some speed to it. The proportionate move ended up here having 1-to-1. The retracement here was 2-to-1. Now I'm trying to figure out what's going on here so I know what to expect from this move up. Is it really going to that higher high, or is it going to come down and go to a lower low than this previous move, than the extent of the retracement prior? Which way is it going to go? I have to determine what is this proportion or disproportionate. If it's disproportionate, the move's coming down. If it's proportionate, it's going back up. So I'm using the same thing. I mean, the full extent of the duck on a retracement is points per pip. That's the entire duck. And if I can make this If I can measure this and it's the same as that previous duck, then we're good to go. There's no more detail than that. That's it. Essentially, it wasn't until, you know, I got caught in some of these retracement extremes, not going to higher highs, that I understood what was going on. And then I saw it in multi-wave when I started doing the math. So, i.e., the retrace was, the discovery of the retrace as being disproportionate was the first thing. Trade, 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 trade. Oh, look at this. A retrace and a retrace can be found without going to extremes just because the pip speed is the same as the retrace was. So, therefore, it has to be. No, it's, you know, call it what we want to call it. So now, you know, we have to go back and say, well, this is what we call the retrace. Here's a retrace and a retrace. In reality, to rewrite the entire SFX30, when we would talk about a retrace, I would present it in terms of points per pip instead of percentages, but then would show it, you know, in terms of harmonic wave convergence relative to, you know, and multi-wave relative to price. But since we started out defining it by a pip speed, we could then look at anything. We could see it's going to move faster than the move up, and we can see the move out of that retrace as either being proportionate to the retrace. See, it's proportionate to the retrace, which by nature makes it a retrace itself. That's the confusion when people do these mid-channel retracement measurements, is it comes out as proportionate. And that's the, you know, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, it must be a duck. Law of association. All right. Any questions about all that? Anybody? Anything? Thank you, thank you. All right, so Mark is reminding me of something. So, let me move this back over here for a second. I just want to figure out how many layers I want to do, Mark, because I want to do it all at once. So Mark's like, okay, fine, bring on the Peak 330, you know, for IntelliCharts users. The Peak 330, what you saw there, well, let me bring this back. We know as we've grown up with Peak 3, that Peak 3 is always local to the wave, local to the chart. Peak 3 is local to the chart, meaning if I'm looking at, oh, Steve, you would have this up there. Come on. Oh, Lord. If we're looking at a 10-minute chart, the Peak 3 is the 10-minute Peak 3. So what we've done is, just like we have with multi-wave, is we've gone into the data stream. Here I'm on a 10-minute chart. So I go into the 30-minute data stream, and I go to those, you know, I create those 4 indicators and get values for Peak 3 at the 30-minute level, and then come over and plot it on my 10-minute chart. A data point is a data point. So the blue here is the 30-minute Peak 3. Hence the P330 that Mark saw up here. Peak 3 for the 30-minute chart. As a script. So, but that could be done, you know, once you do that, then you could, just like multi-wave, we can start coming up with different combinations. So let me put that over there, and let me just expand my Euro chart here, which has, as Mark might notice, because he's got eyes for stuff like that. At the top, there's an alert, there's a script for, let it settle down here, the Peak3 240. So I'm on a 30-minute chart, and this time I've kind of messed with my own standards, but I needed to do, you know, there's like two ways of viewing this. What you see in blue is this local chart, that's the local Peak3. We normally color that green on every chart when it's the local Peak3. I've colored it blue here because I wanted to bring over the 4-hour Peak3, and because it's 4 hour, I want that to be green. So rather than having two green plots on here, that's the Peak3 from the 240 chart. And you can see where I attached it was right here. So, yeah, that's the conflict, is 30, this would have stayed green just as on a 30-minute chart. I wouldn't change it to blue if I was just running just Peak3, because all the time local Peak3 is there, we want it to be green so we always know what it is. But because I'm bringing over the green wave, you know, I had to do something with this one, and so that was just my instant way of accommodating it. Maybe we'll look and see if that's worthy of, you know, doing it or not. But again, very simplistically, you now have something you can trade as a 30-minute system, and maybe now with 10 pip stop losses, a full 2%. But you'll have easy trades. You know, when it pulls away from convergence with the 4-hour wave, you have a trade. And as I've got this plotted here, these are 50 pip channels. So there was only one solid convergence, you know, since I put this on the chart, but it would have been a great trade. So we're now taking this, what was always taught local, 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 you know, we're making it a multi-time period comparison. No difference than on this chart, I've got a 4-hour wave and an 8-hour wave and a daily wave, and I'm bringing them down to a 30-minute chart. So this is just doing the same thing. It's bringing a 4-hour wave indicator plot down to the 30-minute level. It was close. I just threw this on. I haven't spent any time balancing it out to make sure. I mean, I just threw it on just to see, because you can see the prevailing long-term trend. So we have the advantage of this Peak3. So I think we'll probably end up with an indicator, you know, P330, you know, we'll have to spell it out just to make sure we're all reading the same. So it'd be Peak3 and probably a dash, maybe 330, and then a Peak3 240. I already have a Peak3 10, which I can put on my 1-minute chart. So that's probably where we'll end up with those three. A little bit more testing here. And then we can run that against, you know, put that on any local chart. Obviously, we don't want a Peak 310, you know, on a, you always want to go larger wave. You know, I guess I could put that on a 30-minute chart, but again, you know, at the 30-minute trading, I'm looking for where is the 240 wave interacting with it. Okay. You know, so Power 10, and I've got a, well, it didn't put it up. Let me see. I don't think I have it now. Last week I was tracking Power 10 versus Peak3. They're going to be similar. Okay. Remember, Power 10 is what? Yeah, it's multiple peak 3s. It's the 10, the 5, and the 3. So there's only one place we put power 10. Where's that? No. You could put it on a power 10, but for true trade execution, we're looking for, remember, think of this in terms of harmonic wave convergence. And what I was trying to do is clean up things. So with a 30-minute convergence, we have the 30-minute wave, we have the 10-minute wave. It might be too clear for everybody. We have the 3-minute wave, 5-minute wave. I don't have purple, so again I have to use red. We have the 3-minute wave, and then I got my 1-minute wave. Okay. And when they all converge into each other, hopefully in rank order, we call that harmonic wave convergence. So let's reduce that one level and just talk about a 10-minute convergence. So our 10-minute convergence has the 10-minute wave getting there, then the 5, then the 3, and then 1 is our trigger. So if I can combine the 10 and the 5 and the 3 and divide by 3, I get a value which says it's equal to the yellow, the purple, and the red. So now I can reduce that to one wave. I'm just going to color it green. That green wave equals this V, the value. It is the 10, the 5, and the 3. So let's think about that. If this wave is short coming up here, what does that mean? For the most part, we can play with averages all we want, but as we're getting closer to convergence, I mean, it surely could mean, the 5-minute wave is at extreme, and the 3-minute wave is real close, and the 10 minutes way down here, but because this is 2/3, it would pull this up a little, and so it's just a little shy. I mean, we can concoct all sorts of stuff. But if we get into a zone, like between the 88 and the 90, okay, the reality is for us to get this touch, they're all pretty much going to have to be there. And yes, one could be a little higher than the other, and the other two compensate. But, I've seen convergences where you got to bring out a magnifying glass and see it as well. So it's no different. It's just easier to see one wave, and then when that wave is doing its thing, when I can see another wave converge with it. And that convergence, because that other wave is a shorter wavelength, we can see this distinct point. Well, that's what we have with this wave being the power 10. And on a 1-minute chart, we have the live real-time value for this being peak 3. Remember, on the native chart, it's showing the local wave. So that peak 3 is the 1-minute peak 3. So when we have the 1-minute peak 3 converging into the power 10, and the power 10 being the 10, the 5, and the 3, we are getting the same thing as this. It's just cleaner. And because there's compensation in here, as I mentioned earlier, one guy's not doing the part, the other guy, kind of makes up for it inside this tight little box. This is actually typically more accurate than multi-wave. because think about what you got going on with the PT versus what you have going on with harmonic wave convergence. Harmonic wave convergence, we're pulling data from the 10-minute data feed, from the 5-minute data feed, from the 3-minute data feed, and the 1-minute data feed. And we're just plotting those all on the same channel. So there's, minute discrepancies with that. Typically, we're looking at an XY value, a price versus time. And we can plot that on any chart once we turn it into data. So you're looking at the 10-minute wave, the 5-minute wave, the 3-minute wave, and a 1-minute wave. And they're converging. So 4 separate waves coming to a meet at one point. What is peak 10? Well, or power 10. Remember, it's the 10, 5, and 3 peak 3s divided by 3. So what does the power 10 represent? At the 10-minute level, there's 4 turnaround indicators. At the 5-minute level, there's 4 turnaround indicators. At the 3-minute level, there's 4 turnaround indicators. And so this single plot, as I've drawn it as a green line, has 12 turnaround indicators in it telling us the accuracy of the 10, the 5, and the 3 all lining at once. 12 indicators. All separate. They're 12 different, for each time period. And then we're using one here from the local peak 3, but that local peak 3 here, local, that has 4 indicators in it as well. So with this convergence point here, we're getting advice, or we've got a team of 16 analysts telling us we have harmonic wave convergence. So for 10-minute trading, you've got a lot of analysis going on for just 2 plots on the chart. That's why it's called power. It's very powerful in what it does. And in one line, and looking for just one convergence of that line, it is easier to see. Good point, Gary. But you got to go back to, I think in SPT at the time when those were recorded, we were talking about something called TAI, right? So we were measuring the TAI as being kind of like a peak 3. Peak 3 is essentially, power 10 is essentially TAI on steroids. That's the way I would view it. But the whole reason the TAI/power 10 was invented or created is because, if you look at a MACD, guys, that's pulling data. That's all local waves pulled from the same chart. They fit together because they're pulling from the same data stream. What you see with multi-wave is these are 4 different waves, guys. These are from 4 different time periods. And so the precision for and again, it is true. If I go to my 30-minute feed at any given time, and at 10:30, price is 107.75. This is my X value, and this is my Y value. And I can go to any chart that has a time field and a 0 to 100 scale and plot it on it. This is the power of multi-wave. Because guess what? Here's 10:30 on my 1-minute chart or my 5-minute chart or whatever, and guess what? Here's the price, 107.75, so I can get my, that's my price. We're talking about multi-wave, so bad move. 77.7. So in multi-wave, I have 10:30 and 77.7. 77.7 is in the 0 to 100 scale. 10:30 is in the same time scale. So I can go up here and I have an XY point, and that's why it'll be at the exact same spot on a chart on the 1 minute as it will on a 4 hour. It's at 77.7 at 10:30. So we're able to move these waves from other time periods, data streams to one location. But this process, obviously, different time periods, different scale, different absolute scales. Remember we talked about there being slush in the box. At the 30-minute level, that slush box, is there. At the 5-minute level, that slush box is there. And at the 1-minute level, that slush box is there. Well, what we're trying to do is combine these and bring it all to one field and plot it here. And when you get down to just the lower level waves, the 10, the 5, and the 3, and we can throw the 1 in there, the slush that's in there, because each one of these waves brings different slush to it. So sometimes, and that's why sometimes these convergences, you're like, well, is that a convergence or not? Sometimes you just can't tell. Was the lower level wave, was it that much of a lower level leading upper level? Did it, oh gee, one's at 89.2 and the other's at 88.7. Is that close enough? At the 10-minute level and below, it gets very hard to discern this sometimes. Sometimes it's crystal clear. But just the nature of what we're doing, how we're bringing that data, and we're bringing all that data to a 1-minute chart, and some of that data has its own natural slush associated with it. So seeing the textbook A+++ convergence every time on a 1-minute chart is next to impossible. And so if you go back to SPT and you look at those modules for the advanced traders that have been through it, you'll understand the TAI was invented, which is now called Power10. It's been upgraded. That Power10 brings clarity to the point where there might be confusion in what you see with the 10, the 5, and the 3, and the 1. It brings clarity to it. Why does it bring clarity to it? First of all, internal to its own time period, it's eliminated some of that slush because now it's using 4 waves, not just 1 wave. See, when we go to a 10-minute chart and we look at the 10-minute wave, that is 1 plot. When we will go to the 10-minute chart and we look at P3, that is 4 different indicators measuring turnaround. The 10-minute wave itself is a turnaround indicator. They're exhaustion indicators. So it's like, which would you rather have? Your daughter's a gymnast, or your daughter, and I hate to be genderist, but your daughter's a gymnast, or your son's a gymnast, and your son or daughter is a figure skater. Which would you rather have? 1 judge evaluating them, or 4? Where do you think you're going to get the more honest opinion of what they really did, right? So yeah, 4. Which would you rather be doing? Would you rather have, Tim, would you rather be taking a trade on your own, or would you like to have a 5, person Skype where Gary and Mark and me, and Peter are all on microphones, and we have, and your headset includes us all, and we're all looking at that entry together? Which would you rather have? Do it by yourself, or have 4, experienced traders with the system you're trading talking to you, and I don't mean in a distractive way, but giving you analysis on the way? Everybody in every circumstance is going to say, I want the 4. There's a better chance of getting it right. So Peak3 does the best opportunity there is for a convergence at an individual chart level. So when I compare multi-wave 30 versus the 30-minute Peak3, when I look at multi-wave 10 versus the 30-minute Peak3, here's the problem. While it typically is pretty good at getting the value here of convergence, the problem is to compensate sometimes for shortages, some of the 4 indicators that are used have a rounding effect. They're really trend cycles, okay? STC is one of them. So they tend to bring this around. So by itself, it's not a good indicator because, from here to here, on a 30-minute chart, could be 50 pips. But it is good at telling you the exhaustion is in there, right? So then we bring other indicators like multi-wave, which is very precise. Multi-wave has a distinct point where, oh, there it is. That's the extreme. Okay. So Peak 3 then, as I said, has 4 indicators on it, and they all work in concert to where we can get, you know, a pretty good point. And when we're leaving that high here, that's a good time for your entry. Okay, if we're doing a sell as I've drawn it. So Peak 3 is very powerful. Power 10, when I put it on a 1-minute chart, allows me to see precisely. Could we have put the 1-minute Peak 3 into this formula, included it, and divided by 4, and just come up with a single indicator? Yes, we could. The trouble is you need a 10-pip stop loss because it's not going to have a hit and go. As much as the one wants to give you the hit and go, these others are going to lag. Each wave you move up, there's going to be more lag time on it. So let's just go with the 10, the 5, and the 3 and create a trigger, the 1 being the trigger. So this is what we have on our 1-minute chart. We have Power 10, which is 12 indicators. And then we have Peak 3, which is 4 indicators. 16 indicators identifying that spot. So 16 analysts saying that's it. Well, as you've seen with the Peak 3, you know, and it's on the project list to go back and take a look at. But there's really no explanation for some of its behavior where you use multiple colors. It is an option. It is actually the default, right? But the problem you have is in some situations it changes colors before it should. In other words, how is that green? We haven't had any pull up and we're still in the same downtrend. You know, same thing there. Why is that red? There's been no pullback. We're in the same, on a closed candle. There's been no pullback. We're in the same move up. So there's some discrepancies in how it plots. If it stayed true all the time, it would be great to keep it one color. And sometimes it does stay true, you know, like right here. So there's a little discrepancy in it, and that's why Power 10 is typically, you know, just a gold wave on your 1-minute chart, and your Peak 3, I mean your 1-minute Peak 3 is going to be green, so it's green into gold. All right, so the question was, you know, how does Peak 3 differ from Power 10? Power 10 is 3 Peak 3s averaged together. And it's used on a 1-minute chart because we want to use the 1-minute Peak 3 as the trigger. When that indicates all 4 waves are up there. Like I said, we could average it in there, but then this whole wave would still be kind of rounded. It'd be less rounded, but it'd be still rounded. And I want to know in that round where the trigger is, and it's right there. Now, you know, when I have this on my 1-minute chart, I can facilitate that by also seeing where multi-wave is. Where's the 1-minute wave? You know, how does that really look with the 1-minute Peak 3 hitting at the same time? You know, so this can be a confirmation channel. It could be a channel that shows you what's going on if this is too busy. So it could be a, you know, I don't know what you know, it cleans everything up and gives you a cleaner convergence. And if you move up level, you know, like 10 or 30 minute, you can actually trade it standalone. So it has lots of capabilities in it. I'm speaking of Peak 3 / Power 10 or Peak 3 multiple time period Peak 3, etc. It could be standalone. So it either can confirm a trade, which is how we originally used it in Power 10, confirm or make the trade more clear, more visible, or in upper level waves with a little money management tweaks, you can trade it standalone. And people are dropping off. Hey, it's too confusing. Sorry about that. Kind of technical session today. Didn't intend to go there, but there we are. So, you know, when it comes to 10-minute trading, you got the standard, you know, multi-wave. And assisting that, you know, you can use the LC wave. That's just standard harmonic wave convergence kind of trading. Okay. The second way is to include that standard harmonic wave convergence, but now facilitated with the second channel with power 10 on a 1-minute chart with the local 1-minute P3. And again, the 1-minute, the 1-minute Peak 3 is then your trigger. And both of these are kind of traditional. I'd say both of these are, you know, your 310 kind of stop loss scenarios. And then the third thing we'll be looking at is like just Peak 3. In, out, you know, I'm willing to not be as tight with my pips because I can trade more trades and I'm not, there's not the stress and the angst and, you know, the volatility doesn't grab me as much. So Peak 3 and what I've been, you know, and I've traded Peak 3 alone. You guys have known that for a long time. But now we're looking at the Peak 3 10-minute with the Peak 330. So 10-minute local, 10-minute local, and then we bring this over from the 30-minute chart. And we're just, you know, it's still a 10-minute trade. We have looser stops. That's you know, mostly 510. And I take, it's simple. It's converge to converge. And if it stops and turns around mid-channel exit. And that's the system in a nutshell. Converge to converge, mid-channel exit. And I don't, well, what can you do? You know, here's Peak 3, okay, and we have a good bounce here, and it comes down here, and it starts exiting on me, and then it comes back the way down. What can I do to capture this? Don't worry about it. There are plenty of times where it goes extreme to extreme. Just catch those. If you think you're catching extreme to extreme here and it hooks back on you, you exit. In that trade, instead of making 11 pips, you make 4. Big deal. Just go make more extreme to extreme trades. This is where traders get lost. So they get all hung up on this thing here that they got 4 for, and they're trying to convert it into something, and they're doing all sorts of crap to try and measure this hook back and blah, 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 blah. Well, if you're going to do that, just go back to trading harmonic wave convergence trading. The Peak 3 system is designed to be easier. You're going to have a little bit more slippage in it, so you allow a little bit more slippage. And yes, when you lose here, you're losing 1% instead of 0.7 up here. But your gains are much more simple. And your emotional state is much more simple. So that right now is 10-minute trading. Now also you can use any one of these in concert with pitchforks. Pitchforks tend to make things tighter, and so you'll just have to decide for yourself what you're most comfortable with, whether you want to go back to 310 or you want to stay 510. Just depends on which, you know. If you're using 1 or 2 up here, definitely you want to be at 310. If you're using 3 here, you may want to stay 510, but then realize the advantage the pitchfork brings you with its precision. And especially if it's a proven, if it's 8 or 9 pitchfork, you probably don't need the 510. You'll go 310. Yeah, remember, 5 pips a day makes you a millionaire. So I just don't know in these situations when you got 4, you got 5, or you got 6, oh, and it went to 11, and you're crying, you know, look, find your secret here to figuring out when this pullback is not a pullback and blah, 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 blah. And let's talk about it. Bring it to me and you and I will talk about it, and we'll just incorporate it into our standard way of trading harmonic wave convergence on a 10-minute chart. But you don't want to be trading something simple and muck it up by adding complexity to it. The whole reason you want it to stay simple is to keep it simple. You know? And look, you know, all you have to do is look at that chart. You know, I've told you to do this. You know, there's nothing special here. Anybody with IntelliCharts can put Peak 3 on their 10-minute chart. Okay, we're talking just the green wave. And measure, you know, again, here we're down to a 10-pip channel based on the scale that I have. And measure the turnarounds from a peak, you know, to where they are, and then look at mid-channel runs and where you would exit. You know, so channel to channel, these are 10 pips. So I entered here. Forget the pitchfork being here. I'm just looking at leaving this trade down here where we have the Peak 3 coming into the Peak 30, and then they both leave right here. So there's the beginning of our move up, and that ends up being a mid-channel stop, which makes sense. You can see the LC wave at its extreme. So big deal. So it didn't go 40 pips, but it went 15. And on its way down, I'm out of that thing on the green hookback. And there are examples here where you leave an extreme and it hooks back and you exit and it does end up going higher. Oh well, forget those. Get in here and write it down to here, to the next extreme. Generally in the moves where, like here, you would enter, it didn't even make it, you know, very far, and you turn around and exit, generally, you know, you're going to have room to get out of that thing and still be positive pips most of the time. There's a few, like maybe this one here, that it might not be so positive. Maybe it's 0, maybe it's -5, but you just trade peak to a peak. See, the nice thing about this is the hook back works the other way. You know, it's just like the subwave on those trades. So in other words, we got Peak 3 going to an extreme. It pulls just a little bit and starts hooking back up. Why would my stop loss get taken out? I'm exiting right here. If this now goes to another Peak 3, I'll enter again. So maybe this goes out at 0, maybe this goes out at +2, but it shouldn't be a -3 if you trade this as that is. Now, if you want to go stop loss to stop loss, that's fine. I find the stop loss, the 5 is kind of, well, I use a 10 pip ESL. I treat the 5 manual as an ESL. It's kind of just, that's my first point of exit if I'm not exiting via the Peak 3 hitting an extreme. But this here would not stop me out, is what I'm saying. As soon as it pulled down and hooks back and starts going back up, I'm out of that trade. Because it doesn't normally do that. When it turns, and again, you're better off coming across the indicator. I mean, look how crisp that is. Look how crisp that is. Look how crisp that is. Was there a wick over here? I can't quite tell. Yeah, no, can't quite tell. Doesn't look like it. But generally when they're up there, they don't spend a lot of time then going back down. You know, if they're going to go down and be indecisive, they're not hooking back up. They're just sitting flat. So this kind of thing will happen, and generally when you exit on them, they're not going to hurt you. But all these just sharp hookbacks, that's what you want to see. Those are your trade entries. Okay. No. You know, once you get past 5, stochastics gets a little lagging. And so I was just using it as a comparison. I'm kind of doing a double comparison. I'm comparing, you know, the peak 3 turns and what they might look like when they're not so decisive, whether you should stay in or not, you know, if you can see that soon enough. The other thing is I'm kind of adjusting. I'm trying to see what peak 3 works best. I mean, I keep talking peak 3. What stochastics works best based on the performance of peak 3. So I'm evaluating both against each other, really. So at this point, it's not part of the trading game. I don't need it on the chart, but like I said, I'm doing some side work there. So to me, most of the time, I don't actually take multi-wave off the chart, but my RAS is I'm just looking at this in here. You know. And this is where you see the true identity of LC, because, you know, when LC goes to an extreme and peak 3 goes to an extreme, you've really exhausted the move. But in cases like this is a good idea to get out of that mid-channel, because in this case, all of the information that you have says this isn't going to be a retrace. This is, you know, we're ending the retrace. And of course, we know things can go crazy, but I'm not expecting a retrace and a retrace here. I'm just expecting this to go lower. So this here identifies a retrace, that the move you're in is a retrace. Most of the time, they're all good. You know, I mean, look, peak 3 LC, peak 3 LC, peak 3 LC. Boom, and back up. Boom. On the downside, you know, you'll see it all across again. Oh, here's a slight retrace. So this move down gets cut short, you're exiting, and LC is already at the extreme. So those two indicators is where my eyes are. That's it. I don't need anything else really. And this is fun stuff to do while you're waiting for your 30-minute traps, if you're a trap trader. Well, I've used up enough time today, and we touched on a lot, so let's really quickly review. So we talked about various 10-minute systems. We got a complete understanding of a retrace in a retrace. Sometimes there's two names, and sometimes it's called a double retrace. And I guess in the same way that you want to think of in terms of grammar, a double negative, that's exactly what this is. So we have a move up, it starts to come down, and we're saying, oh, that's disproportionate, so we're going to have a move up. And so normally we would expect this to go this way. Once we see it disproportionate, that's our first, you know, kind of like counter move. So they're first to counter one. Then it starts to move up, and because we came from the end of a retrace, we're expecting that higher high. When we see the retrace here, oops, there's counter number 2. And in the end, we're going right back where we thought we should have been heading in the first place. So it's kind of like the double negative. We got faked out this first time, we got faked out the second time, it's coming back down. And then the third thing we talked about today was the relationship between multiple peak 3s and, you know, peak 3 versus power 10. So we covered a lot of distance today. For green traders, for greener traders, I apologize that it went so deep, but hey, you're in an advanced OCR, so if it's too much to follow, just you're getting a glimpse at your future. Let me put it that way. How's that? All right, so I'm going to end it here. It's been an hour and a half, or it's been 2 hours. This has been recorded, so I'll get this up if you want to see it a second time. Later today, later tonight, I got an errand I have to run, a couple errands I have to run for myself, and we're done. All right. Well, thanks for you guys cutting your time out. Good participation here for what we're doing. Hopefully you got something of value, and if you have to see it again, you know, as Mark says, just watch it at like, what, 10 times the speed, Mark? That usually works, right? I think that's Mark's default setting for my YouTube videos, 10x. Yeah, 1.25. All right, y'all have a great afternoon, and I'll see you tomorrow night.